Right quick, before we start the Advisory Council Candidate Forum, I'd like to give everybody a brief reminder on kind of how the Candidate Forum works and how it came about. Several years ago, there was a request that we create an opportunity for the community to pose questions to our candidates. So the way that shook out is that a few weeks out from the meeting and the elections, we put out a poll. We asked people, what would you like to hear from the candidates about? We get submissions. We take a look at those to make sure that all of them adhere to ARIN standards of behavior. Once we verify that, we put those back out and went, okay, here are the questions you gave us. Which ones do you really like? And then we allow folks to vote on those. So the questions you'll hear in these candidate forums have come up through that process. The AC will have 3 questions. The board will have 4. Each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer. And we will work through that in an order that will be established by our moderator. One of the requests that came out of the election process last year was that we have a third-party moderator for the candidate forum to ensure impartiality. So we have brought Paul Marshall in from Boyden, who is going to lead the candidate forum, and I'm going to turn it over to him. And I'd like to invite our our AC candidates to come up and join on stage. The chairs are labeled. We're going to seat you in alphabetical order, but if you're not sure, just check. There's a sticky on the back of the chair. We'll do pass the mic to answer questions. Is everybody clear on the logistics? Are we good? I think we're good. All right, I'm going to hand over to Paul, and he will run the candidate forum.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Hollis, for the introduction, and I'm pleased to be here to participate in this panel. And as Hollis mentioned, we've got 3 questions for this group and 2 minutes each. So in the interest of time, and as everyone gets settled here, I think we'll jump right in. And we'll start with the first question for Allison. And then I think we'll move our way along to Douglas at the end, and then we'll go on screen to Jawad. And then for the second question, we'll start with Jawad, and then we'll switch things up a little bit for the third. I was supposed to have a clicker, I think, Hollis? Ah, there we are. Okay, so the first question, and this is for Allison to start. What experience do you have with ARIN registry policy development? Oh, microphone.
Thank you. All right, so as a member of the ARIN community, I have submitted policies, some of which have become recommended policies as well as editorial policies. I have served on the ARIN Advisory Council for 2 terms, and I have had the privilege of being the chair of the Policy Experience Report Working Group, and that working group has submitted 7 draft policies in the last 12 months. We've submitted more policies before that, but in the last year, 7, which super duper proud of the work that we've done in that group and my fellow people on that committee. My largest accomplishment, though, is working with the community and helping the community bring about their policies. So you will frequently see me sitting at tables, doing table topics, and helping you guys to formulate your ideas and help them to become policy. I'm also happy to meet with you in any social situation, in hallways, in the meetings, or even on our own time outside of ARIN meetings to discuss your policy ideas. So that's my biggest accomplishment as a council member is helping you develop your policy ideas. So,
great. Thank you, Allison. Over to you guys.
So what experience do I have with the ARIN registry policy development? I do not have any policies that I have actually introduced. I'm fairly new to the policy process here, but I do participate in the PPML. I have been to ARIN meetings for the past few years, so I'm given some feedback on draft policies that have come up come up at the meetings there. So again, a little short and sweet, that's about the extent of my policy development so far. And by running for the AC, I hope to increase that knowledge base there for me.
Thanks, Gus. Kendrick?
Thank you so much. None, no experience, Nice question. So that is true, though. I don't have any experience, but my intention is to leverage the experience I have with my private sector clients in network design and obviously my carrier network experience and kind of find the intersection with both to provide some value to the council. I believe there's a good case to be made that the policies that you make and the affectation of those policies, it'll be good to have a perspective on the council from someone who is obviously, who has clients affected by those policy changes. And obviously I worked on projects with ARIN to ensure, for example, that clients get pre-approval and ensuring that 803 transfers are successful. So long and short, no direct experience. This was my first time, but I'm hoping that my experience outside of the council will provide tremendous perspective on the inside this time.
Thank you, Kendrick.
I'm currently co-shepherd on 2 draft proposals or recommended draft proposals for policy. I've spent the last few months working on the ARIN Advisory Council, and I've learned a lot about the policy development process in that time, and hope I can continue to parlay my experience into good policy development.
Okay, I have not originated, shepherded, crafted any policy. However, I have followed on followed on the PPML, and on occasion, when there's a discussion that I felt maybe a particular perspective was not being represented, I weighed in. Although I have found that most of the persons on there tended to be fairly comprehensive. However, having said that, as a regulator, one of the things that we do is a lot of public consultation on policies. And so that exposure is something that I have really been involved in. We do consultation on public policy for anything that comes in. And although the ARIN process is much more democratic, but the end result is really the same. You get input from persons and you make changes as required and move on. So.
I also don't have an extensive background in policy development with ARIN, but my background with many of the organizations I serve does include a lot of policy development experience. Working with a financial institution like a credit union, it's a member service cooperative. We have a fairly democratic within the board and the other entities that manage the organization process for policy development that's pretty robust there. And of course, working through government, I have a lot of experience with legislative work and things of that nature as well. I see, I've been doing a lot of research on, reading up, because since I'm so new, understanding where this, how this process works with ARIN, been deep inside the vault on the website and things like that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Douglas. And we'll go to Jawad on screen.
Yeah, hi. I'm also a newbie, and while to ARIN, I should say, I have 27 years experience operating service providers. And so all of my ARIN experience is kind of looking in from the outside. I think that experience, both as an ARIN customer for so long and in operating companies that rely on ARIN heavily, will be good and much needed perspective. I don't think there are any operators on the current advisory council, if I'm not mistaken, and I feel, newbie or no, that perspective would be very valuable at ARIN.
Thank you, Jawad. So Jawad, we'll start with you for the second question. And the question is, let me switch it up here. What is the biggest challenge, technical or otherwise, that you see on the horizon for ARIN? How would you see this challenge tackled?
Yeah, I think, I think the elephant in the room is that there's a huge sort of rebuilding of the internet. What is this now, the fourth or fifth time we've chucked out the last technology and are replacing it wholesale. And that comes with a lot of new companies and new operators bringing services to markets for the first time. You know, as I noted in my speech, many of those operators are struggling with lack of access to IPv4 resources. We can all talk about IPv6 and how that will be the future. We operate IPv6, but practically speaking, IPv4 is still an absolute requirement. And this, you know, current digital divide, where people are going to get very different internet experiences between urban areas with large incumbent carriers that have all of the IP addresses they need, plus more, and the smaller upstarts that struggle with lack of access to IP resources. I think that's the key challenge, honestly. There are many unused IP resources, and as a community, we need to figure out how to, I think, you know, juice things up and accelerate and simplify and encourage the transfer of those resources to where they're needed. IPs are a public resource and not, as was noted earlier, purely a private property.
Thank you,
So figuring that out, that out is going to be quite the challenge, I think.
Great. Douglas, over to you, and then we'll make our way down to Allison.
Well, as somebody who is new here, you know, this is a hard question for me, but I think for me the answer is that I do a lot of listening to start. So, you know, since I've been here, you know, just a couple days, talking to folks, asking questions, listening a lot. I hear a lot of things about you know, the transition from, you know, IPv4 to v6. How does that look? What is, you know, what are ARIN's roles in that? How the encouragement? How do you deal with issues surrounding, you know, inclusive practices of distribution and things like that? I think that those are all things that appeal to me. But I don't know that I can give a definitive answer here as somebody who doesn't have a deep history to say, oh, this is the thing that I see. But I do think that one of the lenses that I bring is an ability to look constructively at those things and understand them and try to figure them out. And that's something I look forward to doing.
I think the slow adoption and resistance actually to migration to IPv6 will create an issue when we do get to the eventual exhaustion of IPv4. Yes, IPv4 addresses have been depleted, but there are still a few floating around via waiting and available via waiting lists and transfers and allocations and so on. What I think will eventually happen when they get to that point is it will introduce new, it will introduce things like arbitrage and companies finding ways around the policies so that they can still get IPv4 addresses. And I think this will impact the existing policies where some of the policies will have to be adjusted for those specific eventualities.
I think maybe training the next generation or a younger group of people and educating them on how to better utilize IPv6 or to start out with IPv6 if they're a new organization versus trying to cobble along with an older technology would be a big problem. I think it's going to be a big challenge for the ARIN community and the networking community in general in this region.
Okay. Kendrick, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I think that one of the challenges ARIN may have would be for future advisory council candidates scheduling these questions after lunch. Because I'm so sleepy. But seriously, I just scanned the candidates and I realized that I'm the youngest in the group, so apologies. But seriously speaking, I think that as it relates to IPv6, as an example, with the sluggish global adaptation of IPv6, I think that ARIN, a challenge, I think, would be to resist the urge to be too involved with that. And I say that because I believe that ARIN is doing a good job as a registry, and I believe that most organizations have to resist the temptation to go outside of its core purpose. And I remember looking at the formula as a formula that a guy popularized for change, and the gist of it is the level of dissatisfaction in anything should be greater than the cost of implementing the change. And I think that's what's happening with IPv6 in the region specifically. A lot of end users and even some carriers aren't sufficiently dissatisfied with IPv4 to accept the cost of change of IPv6. And that's just in my experience. So I think ARIN's ability to resist the temptation to get involved with that and channel its resources toward other things like RPKI and maintaining a proper register, I think would be a good thing to do. But it's so tempting to get involved, right?
So what is the biggest challenge that I see for ARIN on the horizon? And this is, in my opinion, is participation from new members. Perhaps we have members who have not participated, who choose not to participate in policy discussion. And over the past couple of years, you keep seeing the same people on the PPML, same people come up to the microphones on, policy discussion at the ARIN meetings there. Now, while this is absolutely not a bad thing, but having some of the same voices may not always foster a full discussion or exploration of an issue or policy, as well as, so how to tackle this issue. Man, if I knew the answer to that, I would be a rich person or a wealthier person. ARIN is doing a lot of community outreach, perhaps further community outreach, and just as how I got involved into this was the last ARIN meeting. Both Leif and Amy over there, I met with them during the social, and they encouraged me to get involved. So perhaps more AC, I know it's not my job, but more encouragement from ARIN and its, its staff to get people involved.
Thank you. So I find the biggest challenge right now for ARIN is RPKI adoption. And without RPKI adoption, we have instability in our routing tables, we have some insecurity on the internet, and I do think this is the biggest challenge for all internet registries, not just ARIN, but the tackling has begun. I work for the state of Oregon. We're recent RPKI adopters, and I found it was super easy. There are some really cool how-tos that ARIN has put out. There was a couple webinars that were super informative on how to implement RPKI, and the process took less than a day. And I think that so that was the tackling part. And I think that as the word gets out, I think we're going to have a lot more secure internet and a lot safer internet. So RPKI adoption. And I guess I'm up again, right?
Well, actually, Allison, I was going to switch it up a little bit, and I thought we'd start with Kendrick, and we'd come this way to Allison, and then we can move things over to Brian, and we'll finish with Jawad on screen.
Okay.
So the next question, what purpose does the IPv4 waiting list policy serve, and why shouldn't it just be a single /24 austerity policy like in the other regions?
Okay, thank you. So I think the purpose for the IPv4 waitlist policy is to ensure that there's an objective and fair way for persons to apply or request for free address space that was reclaimed or revoked from businesses. And obviously, it's important that we have a way in which these organizations can gain address space. And I think the waitlist pretty much supports that. Shouldn't it be a single austerity policy like other regions? I think that based on the statistics that we've seen today, and obviously we expect that the waitlist will continue to grow and grow to the point where it'll be years before, I think if someone applies today, or 2 or 3 years before they get a response on availability. So I think that there is a case to be made for a single /24 policy. I think that'll shorten the number of requests.
Great. Gus?
Okay, I'm going to take this question in reverse order and answer the single/24 austerity policy first. ARIN, I believe, is the only RIR that has a policy where you can request up to I believe it's a /20 on the waiting list there. And I'm in favor of moving that down to a /23 or /24 to bring it more in line with the RIPE NCC or LACNIC. And yes, the wait times for certain RIRs to get IPv4 resources is long. I think the LACNIC said with the current list, they will fill it by 2027. I think ARIN said by 2024, and NCC is in 18 months. Now you have your APNIC and your AFRINIC, then they will issue you resources, but especially with APNIC, only if you are a new member there. So back to the first part of the question about what is the purpose, or what purpose does it solve, and a little bit of a cynic here. So in 2022, I don't believe that it has a purpose other than a glimmer of hope to obtain a small amount of affordable IPv4 resources, and as long as you keep paying your ARIN bill, it's yours. There is a lot of inequality in the marketplace right now. And if you have the financial resources, you can obtain IPs as much as you want. But ARIN still has that needs-based justification, that prevents private equity firms and whatnot, people with deep financial pockets, from buying up all the resources and then hoarding them. So, IPv6 is not the answer today. New startup ISPs in developing markets have every incentive to adopt V6, yet they cannot sometimes do that and default to V4 just because of maybe a vendor issue. Maybe a small ISP in Bogota, Colombia is firing up and they need a /24 or /23. Yes, they went to LACNIC, got their AS number, and they got their initial V6 allocation, but the vendor for the equipment doesn't support V6. So, they would need V4 for that. So that's my time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So the purpose of the wait list is to distribute IP address space to community members that demonstrate a need for that space. And it's made up of the reclaimed and returned IP address, occasionally returned IP address space. And different members of the ARIN community have distinct and unique IP address space needs, and the NERPM has set policy on how much space can be requested to discourage fraudulent use of that space. On the advisory council, that's something that we've put a lot of time and effort into. Currently, the maximum size you can receive on the wait list is a /22, and customers holding an aggregate of a /20 can't even receive space off of the wait list. Because the allocation of what you get on the wait list is based on a needs assessment, I have less apprehension about keeping it to a /24. However, after Mr. Sweeting's presentation this morning, we can meet a lot of needs if it is limited to a /24. So I look forward to any policy ideas that might come in on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Brian, over to you.
Yeah, I have to agree. After seeing John Sweeting's presentation, I would be in favor of lowering the waiting list allocation to a /24. The waiting list serves the community in that for the available IPv4 space left, a way to fairly disseminate those addresses across those who demonstrate need for those addresses, and maybe for many of the smaller organizations that need those as well. I'm in favor of the waiting list.
The purpose for a waiting list, or the purpose the waiting list policy serves, simple, efficient allocation of resources. And there's scarcity, so there needs to be some method by which those resources would be allocated to persons. The policies currently look at the needs of the community. Someone making a request has to demonstrate that need, and upon analysis, upon review, then that determination is made. Should there be a shift to a single /24? Well, all of the members, not just members, all the operators within the ARIN space do not have similar needs. And so with a single size fit all, maybe, maybe not. We'll let the membership decide. So we'll see if policy is presented to address that.
So for me, this question, I would say this is probably, of the 3 questions, this is my favorite, in part because it allowed me to get really curious about things and what goes on here. So I spent a bunch of time doing some research, reading up on the wait list. I looked at, RIPE's policies and what's different there and tried to understand. And I talked to some of the other members of the advisory council just to feel stuff out. Like, this is new to me. Do I understand this? So, when I was answering this question to myself, I thought about the framing of the question is really, compared to an austerity policy, what's the purpose of what we have? And I think that, there's a couple other folks that pointed out, one of the really critical pieces was data to this, and the data that was presented this morning was pretty compelling. And if I'm going to, about what happens if it's moved to a /24, and for me that comes down to the ideas about if there's one bias I'm going to acknowledge when I'm in a democratically democratic framed organization, it's a bias towards inclusivity and being approachable to broadening out the base of what's there, and I find that to be a worthy cause if this policy does get revisited.
Thanks, Douglas. And Jawad, we'll go to you on screen.
Yeah, thank you. The waiting list policy is just a fact of life, right? There's, as was noted earlier, there's a limited source of address blocks and much more demand. So first come, first served, and I think ARIN chose to do /22s instead of /24s. And yes, it's because of the differing needs of folks. Look, if I'm a network operator and I can only get a /24 every couple years, that means I can only add 200 and a few customers every couple years. That's not a practical solution for service providers. If I'm an enterprise and I need a /24 just so I can do BGP or something, yeah, sure, that might be a workable solution. I think the austerity policies handing out just /24s in the other regions is premised on the idea of you get a /24, you stick it in front of your CGNAT, but you're otherwise an IPv6 operator. CGNAT adds a lot of complexity and significant cost. I don't know if any of you have ever priced CGNAT systems, but if I'm a startup in many markets in the country, that's just not going to happen. You're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars and up. Not to mention, so the CapEx and operational costs. So I would say ARIN should not only not have a policy of restricting these to /24s, but I think the focus should be on the supply side. What can ARIN do to encourage and foster organizations that have IP resources they're not using to return them for the benefit of the community?
Thanks, Jawad. And that concludes our Advisory Council Candidate Forum. So thank you to everyone. You did great. Yeah, thank you.